Hi, everyone. Brian Tomaszewski here. I'm really excited to present this video on getting a job with Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. I've been meaning to make a video like this for a very long time. Although it's been many years since I have directly worked in the GIS industry, I'm constantly surrounded by students who study GIS and are looking for jobs in the industry, as well as GIS professionals who make their livings using GIS software. So in this video, I'll give you my advice on how to get a GIS job and some ideas to think about as you go about trying to find a GIS job. I'll first talk about the idea of what I call what's in a name, or what you should be looking for in terms of actual job titles. I'll then guide you through looking at some specific job titles so you can get a sense of the kinds of GIS jobs that are out there and where you should be looking to find such jobs. Related to that point, if you're a student coming out of school studying GIS, or perhaps you're looking to make a career switch to learn or use GIS more in your day-to-day work, I'll give you some ideas on how to build your skill set so you can find a GIS job. I'll then guide you through some examples from the United States and around the world of actual GIS jobs descriptions from some commonly used job websites. These can be very helpful for seeing what employers are looking for so you can gauge your own preparation to enter the GIS job workforce. And then I'm really excited to present interviews with two of my colleagues who are working GIS professionals who can give you practical, solid advice and experiences on working in the GIS industry. And I'll end the video with some final thoughts and advice for you to consider as you go forward in your GIS career. Because GIS is so interdisciplinary and used by so many different industries, I would say it's important when you begin to think about looking for a GIS job to see what even some of the titles that are being used for the field. I've even heard from some people that the term Geographic Information Systems may even eventually be going away, although it's been around for such a long time, so people I think will be using it a lot. So here are a collection of terms to think about when you go looking for a GIS job. If you also have any ideas for terms to consider, please leave them as a comment below in this video. Keep in mind too that in the broader computing world, many people don't even know about GIS as a specific discipline, and the topic simply refers to anything with geographic data and maps as geo. Related to the idea of different terms that can be used to broadly describe things related to geographic information and maps are the wide variety of specific job titles that you'll find on employment websites. Here is a collection of actual job titles I found when preparing this video from GIS job websites. Note that some of them use the specific term GIS, while others use geospatial. And keep in mind that some job titles may not have anything related to GIS in them, even if they involve some aspect of geographic information and maps, and related topics like the term geo used to broadly relate to these areas. So what is it that you should study if you want to get a job in GIS? Perhaps the most dominant perspective on this is that it is incredibly rare to find a job that is purely GIS. Most often the case you're going to find are jobs where some type of application domain is tightly linked with GIS, as I show here in this Venn diagram. So it will be important for you to think about studying topics that have some type of spatial aspect to them or problem solving. For example, you'll often find GIS jobs in the utilities industries, so it would be good to learn about things like power transmission, water utilities, and so forth. GIS also has a very long tradition in the environmental areas, and perhaps you're watching this video as someone who is currently studying environmental science and has taken some GIS classes. So it's actually difficult to say what exactly you should study, so do research on your area. For example, a long time ago, I studied archaeology, and through archaeology, I became interested in GIS, as mapping is an important part of archaeology. So do some basic internet searching on terms like your application area and how it relates to GIS. For example, here you can see me doing a search on the terms GIS and archaeology, and I can find lots of articles on this topic to read about how GIS is used in that particular domain. If you are brand new to GIS, however, I do recommend that you learn some of the basic background concepts related to GIS software and underlying spatial data formats, as these are a unique form of computing. Check out this video on this channel to get started with some introductory materials related to GIS in general. I also wanted to mention that perhaps one of the best things that you can do to try to get and secure a good paying GIS job is to study what I'm going to call computing topics that can go along with your core GIS skill set and your knowledge of a particular domain. Now, when I say computing topics, I mean things like computer programming, database administration, software development, and web development. With the era of big data, topics like artificial intelligence and machine learning are also going to be very important when combined with GIS and domain knowledge. For example, you should learn the computer programming language Python. You should also learn a computer programming language called JavaScript that is used for websites. Your understanding of database tools like Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle are also beneficial. Also, learn the language of software engineering and development. You can see this kind of thing in job descriptions like I'm showing you here. If you're not familiar with terms like seen in this job description, do some research and look them up to learn more about them. I work at a technical university, and many of our students who are studying computing topics get jobs in the GIS industry without ever having actually used GIS because they have strong skill sets in areas such as computer science, information technology, and software engineering. So consider doing a minor in some type of computing area if it's available to you at your university. I'll be upfront and say that topics like computer programming are more challenging if you don't have a background in this area, hence why these skill sets are more in demand. However, take a look at this video as one example that's a gentle introduction to Python programming using GIS software if this is an area that you're new to. And of course, there's lots of other YouTube videos you can find to help build your computing skill sets. In the next part of the video, I wanted to walk you through looking into some actual GIS job websites and job descriptions to give you a sense of what employers are looking for. Note that this is from the perspective of the United States, so adjust accordingly based on where you live and watching this video. I provide links to these websites in the video comments below. In the United States, the GIS Jobs Clearinghouse is perhaps one of the most well-established websites that specifically focuses on posting GIS jobs. It's also an excellent resource to see what kind of jobs are out there and what are the specific skills that employers are looking for. If you're not already on LinkedIn, I recommend that you create a profile on this employment networking platform. In addition to being a primary resource that you can use for professional networking with people in the GIS industry, it's also a place where you can look for specific jobs. Here, you can see some examples of GIS jobs I found doing a search on LinkedIn. I also recommend that you look at job searching websites that may not be specific to GIS, but include technology jobs and GIS jobs. One popular platform is Indeed.com. Here, you can see I did a search of GIS jobs on Indeed with lots of interesting results that can give you some ideas of the types of jobs and skills that our employers are looking for. Finally, I also wanted to mention that you may consider looking at job websites that are connected with your particular domain of interest. For example, I've done a lot of work in the humanitarian sector, and I often look at the Relief Web job postings for ideas on GIS jobs in the international humanitarian sector. At the time of making this video, the war in Ukraine has been going on for about a month, And you can see that there are now a lot of jobs for entry level GIS positions working with humanitarian organizations in areas near the conflict zone. And remember that sometimes jobs may involve GIS, but the actual job title will have nothing related to GIS in the description. So do your research on the job to find a good fit with your interests. In the next part of this video, I want to give you the opportunity to get some practical advice on getting a GIS job from two people who are currently working in the GIS industry. I think you'll find their experience valuable for what it actually takes to get at GIS jobs and the pathways you can travel to get there. I'm here with Brian Baldwin. And Brian, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, sort of your background, what your job is, and your job is now?
Awesome. Sure. No, great to be here, Brian. Thanks so much for asking to do this. This will be really fun. Name is Brian Baldwin, and I work as a solution engineer at Esri. So I've been there for about 8 years now. And my role, when I try to explain what what a solution engineer is to people, it's really a technical generalist. So I don't, code, I don't develop, I'm not in the guts building software, but it's really showing people just kind of how GIS can be used and trying to stay up to speed with the latest tools for, how people in the workforce are using GIS today and how it's really just changing dynamically.
Okay, great. And let's see. How is GIS though a part of your work? You said you were kind of a generalist. Can you give me some specific examples of how you might use GIS in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, no, great question. It's funny. In the roles at Esri, there are people that are, as I said, kind of building software and using the software every single day. There's also a lot of people that maybe, never touch the software if they're in marketing or if they're in other roles. So for me, it's really a mix of the two. Even this morning, I was in a conversation with another university that's looking to build out, indoor mapping and starting to look at how can we, get real-time navigation? How can we get routing? How can we start to use this kind of information for operations? And so it was talking through at more of a kind of system architecture level, what is that potentially going to look like? What kind of data do they have? How are they going to load that? And then even 2 weeks ago, I still get to kind of keep my hands in the actual software too. So I built out a little example and a lesson of grabbing historical imagery and from Louisiana. So I went to grad school down in New Orleans, so still love the city and try to stay a little attached to it. But long story short, Claiborne Avenue, classic case of urban revitalization, and they went through a historically Black neighborhoods, built an elevated expressway, et cetera. And so I used just a simple story map to show, parcels and the buildings, prior to the highway, and then what it looks like today. So users can go and swipe and compare, and then place some historical photos at intersections. So you can kind of see, a little bit of what the neighborhood looked like. So still get to kind of play with the tech, which is pretty fun.
Cool. And you mentioned about how you went to school in Louisiana. Tell me a little more about your educational background and how, if in any way, that led to where you're at now with Esri.
Yeah, no, great question, Brian. So I started off with just two courses in GIS. And honestly, my entire academic career or my entire educational career has been just those two courses that I took at Geneseo.
Okay.
And full disclosure, obviously, Brian here on the, the interview panel was one of the instructors for my advanced GIS course that I took at Geneseo. And so with those two classes, I tell this story a lot, but it was funny. I went into the Peace Corps afterwards, and coming back from the Peace Corps, thought I would have this wide array of options in the professional world to be able to get a job anywhere. And it turned out I really needed to fall back on a hard skill that I had.
Oh, okay.
Nobody really cared that I could write, 30-page papers on the, Reformation of China, et cetera. It was, what can you actually do? And GIS was one of those skills. So I had just about a year and a half, worked in Duluth, Minnesota for a small GIS shop doing some pretty basic GIS work. And from there, went to grad school in New Orleans to get a master's degree in urban and regional planning. And similarly, while I was there, there were a lot of folks and students that were interested in the theoretical side and the policy side. But besides writing, nobody could really do anything do
Hmm.
anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I found myself again kind of using GIS and using some of those skills to do surveys and kind of show what the recovery looked like in New Orleans. And I ended up kind of being the GIS person in the department for a while. And so from that, just kind of kept getting more and more GIS positions from there on out.
Okay. So what was it that attracted you to Esri? How did that opportunity come your way?
So I was from to jump from New Orleans, I ended up in Hawaii doing some invasive species mapping and kind of literally just scrolling through imagery looking for a specific kind of tree species that was spreading through the native canopy in Hawaii, which was mind-numbingly boring. And it's fun to kind of compare that to some of the ways you could use either object detection or some of the ways to try to to automate the detection of that. So that was one thing I did, and then from there I ended up getting a job in Milwaukee doing crime analysis for the police department. And while I was there, I saw that there was a position open at Esri for somebody that had a bit of experience in law enforcement, but then also a broad array of experience in different fields. And so I was able to basically apply for that job and say, I've worked in natural resources for a bit of time, urban planning, law enforcement side. And so it was, I'm sure there's a lot of places where that kind of interdisciplinary
Yep.
background is great, but it was, one of the first times at an interview where someone said, "We love that you have no focus and you just kind of have this array of experience."
Cool. Okay. So we have a lot of viewers of my channel from all over the world, although this video will really be designed from a US perspective. So, but what is your advice to somebody who might be studying GIS in school, either undergraduate or graduate school, and they want to get a job with GIS? What's your advice to them?
My biggest advice would be, as you're looking, I mean, number one is probably just look at positions that are open. Go and it might sound like the most tired advice ever, but look at job boards and see what kind of roles are out there. What do you actually want to do? And
Mm,
how do you want to kind of apply yourself? Because it could be working in Guam to help turtles and endangered species. It could be working in
yeah.
a national park. It could be helping utilities. I mean, the part of GIS right now that's so fun is that it can be applied to any discipline you can imagine, and there's positions open across the world in so many different fields and areas. So I would say that just kind of really zero in on a what you'd like to do, and then after you do that, start to look at kind of what those positions are looking for in terms of specific skills. A lot of them will start listing out that they want experience with, maybe field tools or the ability to build, something as simple as a story map. So make sure that you look at, what is listed in that job posting and start to build up your resume and your experience with those things. And then the last piece I'd say too, and I find that I say this in lectures and to students all the time, is when you're going to interview or when you're looking for those positions or starting to talk to people, you can go find open data sets, and I'll
Mm,
give an example of just Boston. So if you wanted to get an internship or a job, at a department in Boston or you see one open, go and grab Open GIS data for Boston and create or configure a dashboard or a web application or something else you can actually bring to the job interview and show that department head or that hiring manager, what you can do and the skills that you can bring to the job. I think it's great to point to projects or class projects and work that you have done, but the ways that GIS can be done now and how configurable and kind of quick it can be, definitely spend a little bit of time building something custom that you can bring into that job interview or for that internship. I think there can be a lot of value for that. And it just shows how quickly you could bring value into that position.
Cool. Well, that's really great, Brian. That is really excellent advice. Particularly building a portfolio, being interdisciplinary, and really open-minded. And if you've been watching this video up to this point, these are ideas that the overall video talks a lot about. So thanks for that advice. I think that'll be really valuable. Um, so I heard you also have a YouTube channel. You want to tell me about your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I've started piecing just kind of a couple videos together as kind of introductory labs and lessons. And I'm going to start kind of playing around with it a bit more to make things that are a bit more, kind of build, I guess is the best word. I've got a piece of technology to do some kind of digital whiteboarding. And so that's something I'd like to kind of incorporate a bit more to do almost traditional whiteboarding in a desk in a classroom, but then bring that to some of the videos to illustrate concepts and theories and ideas. So, introductory GIS, but then trying to have it be a bit more, building as you would kind of see on a whiteboard in a classroom.
Okay, great. What's the name of your channel?
I have no idea. I can't even
Okay.
remember right now.
Well, we'll do the classic. So if you want to check out Brian Baldwin's channel, I think I have to go like this. Look at the link here above, and I'll also put a link to Brian's channel in the comments section of this video. So check out his content there. He's the real deal. He works in GIS, has a lot of years of experience, and I'm sure the YouTube community would love to hear from you, Brian, again, because you're, like I said, you're working in GIS directly. So is there anything else you want to add to this video, or people looking for a job, a GIS job?
Yeah, I would just reiterate, kind of what I said earlier, Brian, is just, if you're looking for position, if you're looking for work, just go for what you're passionate about, if it's the field or the type of work, because there's so much that can be done, applying this technology. And number two, there's if I think of myself kind of looking, if I'm looking to hire somebody, or if we're looking to get people, the more you can speak to, the specific challenges and show that you understand what that organization needs and what they're trying to do, it goes so far in an interview. So,
Yeah.
I mean, an example being Nature Conservancy. It could take you 10 minutes to get on their website, read about what they're trying to do, and even build out a simple web application or a viewer using open data showing bird migration pathways or threatened forests or threatened species. And you would then rise to the top of that applicant pool, I mean, right away, by showing that you are passionate, you care, and this is what you can bring on day one, to their organization.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, and look forward to more videos from your channel, and working together with you on teaching here at RIT. So
Awesome.
great.
Well, thanks so
Thanks.
much, Brian. This was great.
Okay. All right. So we're on to another interview with someone who works in the GIS industry. And it's my pleasure to have Catherine DuBreck. Did I say your name correctly?
Yes.
Great. So Catherine, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, and sort of right now, like, what kind of work do you do with GIS?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So my name is Catherine. Right now, I am sort of a jack of all trades, where I'm working at the town of Penfield, New York. I work in town hall in the planning and engineering department as the junior town planner. A lot of my work has been GIS related so far. So I'm like updating our GIS infrastructure. If there's a new neighborhood put in and the road is dedicated to the town, so they are responsible for plowing and things like that, I update the roads layer to show that. And same thing with sewer piping and manholes and things like that. And then I'm also looking at new projects. So if there's a restaurant that wants to come in on this vacant parcel in the right zoning, I help look at the plans and make sure things are okay and they're appropriate for the area, and things like that. It's a really great job. I'm also working at RIT as an adjunct for an intro GIS course, which has been a blast. and sharing my love of GIS with more people and hoping to get them involved in the field.
All right, great. What kinds of technology and software tools do you use in your, I guess we'd call it your day job, but also with your teaching?
That's a really good question. The town is a little bit behind. So
Oh,
we are working on ArcMap 10.3.
oh, really? Okay.
So it's a little bit old,
Okay.
but we do have an online GIS viewer. So we have a web map that we have one that's internal. So it just is showing for town staff a little more detail. And then we also have a public viewer. So residents can go online and click the online GIS viewer and see where their parcel lines are or where there's flood zone or things like that.
Yeah.
And I've been starting to transition more to Pro because with our license, we get a free download of ArcGIS Pro. I'm working more with that, which has been really nice because with the adjunct teaching
Mm,
course is focused on ArcGIS Pro. So I get to dabble in Pro during the day and then apply it and teach students Pro during the week at night and still play around in ArcMap, which is what I was taught in all my previous GIS courses. So it's nice to still use that, but we're going to push towards getting with the times soon.
okay. Now that's really interesting. I wasn't aware of that. As much as you can say or know, would you say that it's similar that other organizations like town or county? We can talk a little bit in just a moment about your involvement with groups like New York State GIS, but is it, as far as you know, sort of through the grapevine, or a lot of people still using ArcMap 10 and haven't fully made the transition to ArcGIS Pro?
I think I think it's more common than we like to imagine. I know in my previous job, I was in the private sector, and
Mhm.
they were still using ArcGIS or Arc Map and Arc Catalog and things like that. It
Yeah.
was a more recent version than what I use at the town, but it was still they hadn't made the transition to Pro, and that was even through the end of last summer, 2021. They were still on ArcMap, and then before that, I was with a different town, and they were still using ArcMap. So I think some people might just be resistant to the change
Yeah.
still, but once you get past that, I like using Pro better.
Yeah.
Just I think funding, well, not funding because you're still probably about the same for the license, but maybe transitioning data might take a little bit longer and all sorts of learning curves. And if you don't have a designated GIS person, there's a learning curve if you've learned ArcMap and now you have to learn ArcPro, and it just depends.
Yeah. Do you ever work with any open source tools like QGIS?
I don't at work, but I do volunteer with an organization local in trails, hiking trails in my hometown. And I last year started working with them as their mapping volunteer to help teach them QGIS and just make them aware of it. And so sort of getting them more independent so they can all learn how to use it, the board members, and do their own updates instead of just relying on one individual person. So they're up and running with QGIS, and it's really cool to see.
And why did you go the route of QGIS?
That is the most familiar open source GIS to me at the time, especially last year, but learned a little bit more about other options. But I think that was QGIS was most familiar to me. I also took a class QGIS, so knew how to use it a little bit better than some of the other options out there.
Okay. Interesting. So you work with a wide range of different tools, it sounds like. The Esri, the different generations of Esri tools. and then a little bit with QGIS. That's really interesting. So for those of you watching this video that are thinking about, trying to find a job in GIS, I think Catherine's perspective that you may be in school learning about the newest tools, like we, at RET, we have a lot of great resources. So we do ArcGIS Pro, but it may be good to at least be aware of the older software if that's what the organization perhaps that you're looking into trying to find a job is using, or the open source tools like QGIS, that if you watch other videos on this YouTube channel, I actually have a whole video on introducing the topic of GIS using open source tools. I think this is where I'm supposed to point up. So follow this, follow this link to define that. So Catherine, tell me a little bit about your background, your education, what led you into a career and I would say a passion for GIS.
I stumbled into it when I was in undergrad. I wanted to do biology. At first, I wanted to do physics, and that didn't work out. It was wasn't the same as high school physics, so it didn't work
Yeah.
out. Wanted to do biology, and that didn't work out due to organic chemistry. And then I knew I wanted to do a planning class as a requirement for the minor and love planning, wanted to do planning for grad school, future jobs, but also didn't want to be sort of pigeonholed just in case planning didn't work out. So I went on to so I got my bachelor's in geography, took a couple of GIS classes there, went on to grad school to do a master's of science in geography and used GIS so much during that program that I started to like GIS more than planning. But when I moved back home, I went to grad school in Canada. So when I moved home, I worked downtown Rochester for the Regional Planning Council and decided to shift gears and go the GIS route. And then there I just started loving GIS, where I was using it every day. And then decided to continue my education with a certificate program at community college, Monroe Community College, locally. And there I learned a lot more about remote sensing and QGIS, and got involved with a program there that helped 4 students in Colombia, South America, to build an app for water quality data collection. And then we actually went to Colombia to help collect the data. Cool. That was great to see, sort of not just the United States uses GIS. I think I sort of forgot that. That GIS can be used in different languages and for all sorts of projects. And that was really awesome to see. And now I'm in a really awesome position where I have half planning and half GIS. So it's come full circle and I've finally found my niche.
That's awesome. And if you weren't aware that eventually when this video goes on YouTube, my channel is watched by people all over the world. So there could be somebody right now from India watching your interview and getting perspectives and advice from you. So I think that's great that you've had a little taste of some international use, international from the perspective of somebody from the United States. I'm curious too about your current job. Do people ever come to you for sort of, for lack of better terms, computing things, technical things like, oh, she's a computer person, she can also do GIS and she can do I was just curious if that ever comes up.
That does. It's less for me and more for our town planner who was previously in my position.
Okay.
So they still sort of go to him for that, but I think for that reason where he was doing GIS and people come to him for like Microsoft Access questions can you set up this printer and things like that. So it's definitely, and in my job at the planning council, I was the resident IT person. So there was which I'm not a big like IT person outside of GIS. So it was a lot of troubleshooting and figuring out how to do things, and which was awesome. I learned a lot, but yeah, there's definitely that association with, this one software, so you're now the IT expert of the whole entire office.
Well, because earlier in this video, I talk about my own particular perspective on getting, if you really want to get a job in GIS, I think having strong connections with broader computing, just like you said, information technology, I think is a really key thing. Are there any particular skills that you found that are not necessarily about GIS, but are more computing skills that you mentioned Microsoft Access? Anything else like that, like databases or other topics that you might recommend?
Yeah, I think less in my current job, but just having seen just job postings, coming across them and sharing them with students. If you know any sort of programming language, I think that is a huge help. Um, Python is really goes hand in hand with our GIS and the Esri suite. But if you know, like, the C and C plus, C plus plus, Java, like all of those, I think could really help you. Maybe not be required, but if you're looking for a job and it's down to you and someone else, and you have like a little bit of experience with programming and they don't, not always, but sometimes they lean towards you as the person they want to hire just because you have that extra skill.
Yeah. Okay.
Python, and more recently, I think if you know any like Postgres,
Oh, okay.
PostgreSQL,
Yeah.
and PostGIS, and just SQL in general, I think that also helps.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So database management, open source databases, SQL in general. Yeah, that's great. So that's probably a good segue into sort of my last question. Like, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to get a job in the GIS world?
I would say now that we're sort of going back to in-person conferences, conferences are a great way to meet people in the field. And sometimes knowing someone or having that connection can help you in the long run get a job. So networking is huge. And then I also think just volunteering. So if you have a volunteer experience with the New York State GIS Association, for example, you get the same sort of networking experience, and now you have something to put on your resume where you don't just have the coursework or the internship, but now you are using your skills to give back to your community, volunteering with, like I mentioned, Friends of Webster Trails. That's just a local example, but getting involved in giving back, I think, is huge. And then just making sure you're checking job postings, making sure you're sort of being aware of what they're asking for and seeing how you can fit that, or if they're asking for programming, maybe do a little background research that might help, not necessarily become an expert in it, but if you know a little bit about it and you can talk about it in an interview, I think that'll help set you apart from other candidates.
All right, good. That's really great advice, especially from someone like yourself that's really gone through. I think a lot of people who work in GIS, we all go through some kind of pathway that doesn't seem clear and obvious with what the endpoint is. I know that's my case. I studied archaeology a long time ago and never in a million years would
Oh,
have thought,
cool.
yeah, but it's spatial, right? I mean, I think we're, as geographers, spatial thinkers, spatial problem solvers, I think that's kind of the common thread, and the different tools we use and skills to enable that, I think, is key. Well, is there anything else you want to say? I mean, ideally this will get watched by people all over the world, so any other things you want to mention? Or
Yeah, just if you're interested in connecting, I've branched out a little bit more on LinkedIn. So I've
okay.
connected with someone in Jamaica and learned about GIS in Jamaica. And I'm just interested to hear how people are using GIS in a global sense. So that's awesome. And just up on old skills and trying to learn new skills because the field is changing so much that you might be an expert in ArcMap, but now we've moved to ArcPro and
Yeah.
things like that. So just keep learning and brushing up on skills, and you'll get a job.
Awesome. So I'll put a link to Catherine's LinkedIn profile in the video description so you can connect with her that way if you watch this video, and just look in the comment section of this video. So, all right, Catherine, well, thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So to conclude this video, here are some final thoughts and advice. Be interdisciplinary. Like you've heard several times in this video, study a wide range of topics such as GIS, remote sensing, information technology, computer programming, and any other disciplines relevant to your career interests. Be open-minded. Be flexible with opportunities that present themselves. Given the diversity of GIS applications, you never know when some aspect of GIS you never considered could become a great career opportunity, just like you heard in the interview with Brian Baldwin. Get involved. Volunteer. As Catherine discussed, volunteering is a great way to build GIS skills and experience while looking for a job. Check out some of the links below on technical groups like GIS Course for idea on volunteering. Stand out and go the extra distance. Like you heard in the interview with Brian Baldwin, show your passion for GIS. Do research on the places you want to work. Create small projects with their data to show why you're the best for the job. Keep learning and growing your out-of-the-box GIS skill sets. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it informative and for helping you along the pathway of finding a career in GIS. Remember to look at the links below in the video description to access the resources I've discussed in this video. Keep in touch, and best wishes for finding a GIS job. Hi, this is Brian Tomaszewski. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and share this video. Also, please consider subscribing to this channel and clicking the notification icon to stay up to date on new videos from this channel. Thanks for watching.